A brutal winter storm had turned Chicago streets into sheets of ice, but inside the Whitmore mansion, crystal chandeliers glowed over an extravagant engagement celebration. Wealthy guests drank champagne, while Grace Carter, a 26-year-old maid in a faded blue uniform, hurried across the marble floor carrying a silver tray. Then she heard an elderly woman cry out. Near the entrance, Vanessa Collins, the billionaire's elegant fiancée, was gripping the woman's arm and ordering security to throw her into the snow. The stranger wore an old coat, carried no purse, and looked as though she did not belong among the city's richest families. "You people always think you can walk into places like this and beg," Vanessa hissed. Grace set down her tray and stepped between them. "Let her go." Vanessa laughed. In front of the entire room, she slapped Grace across the face. What happened next silenced every guest. Grace slapped her back. She had just struck the future wife of billionaire Ethan Whitmore to protect a woman she had never met. What Grace did not know was that the frightened stranger standing behind her was Eleanor Whitmore, Ethan's mother and the true owner of the mansion. At that exact moment, Ethan appeared at the top of the staircase. If you believe a person's true character is revealed by how they treat those without power, stay with this story and subscribe. What happened after that slap would expose a secret pregnancy, a stolen fortune, and a betrayal hiding inside the Whitmore family. Grace had taken the job because she desperately needed money for her younger brother's surgery. Ethan trusted almost no one, especially women who knew his wealth. Vanessa appeared perfect, sophisticated, and devoted. Eleanor, however, had already seen something none of them understood. The poorest woman in the room had just risked everything to defend the richest woman in the house. And before the night was over, Grace would be punished for telling the truth. Ethan Whitmore remained at the top of the staircase, one hand resting on the polished railing as the last echo of the slap disappeared beneath the crystal chandeliers. No one moved. The string quartet had stopped playing. Champagne glasses remained suspended near painted lips, and nearly 200 guests stared at the young maid standing between Vanessa Collins and the elderly stranger she had tried to protect. Grace Carter's cheek burned where Vanessa had struck her. Her own hand was still trembling, not from regret, but from the shock of realizing what she had done. She had been working inside the Whitmore mansion for less than 3 hours. Now she was almost certainly unemployed. Vanessa slowly turned her face toward Ethan. A red mark had already appeared across her cheek, but the humiliation in her eyes was far greater than the pain. "Ethan," she whispered, "she attacked me." Grace opened her mouth, but Vanessa spoke louder. "I was only trying to remove a trespasser. This woman came through the staff entrance, dressed like she belonged on the street. Then your maid became violent in front of all our guests." "That isn't what happened," Grace said. Vanessa's eyes sharpened. "No one asked you to speak." Grace glanced behind her. The elderly woman was rubbing the wrist Vanessa had grabbed. Her old gray coat was wet with melting snow, and several silver strands of hair clung to her pale face. Grace had seen that frightened expression before. Her mother had worn it during the final months of her illness whenever hospital employees spoke over her, as though poverty had made her invisible. Grace stepped closer to the woman. "Are you hurt?" The stranger studied her with unexpected calm. "I'll be all right." Ethan descended the staircase, one measured step at a time. At 34, he had built Whitmore Technologies into one of the most valuable cybersecurity companies in the country. He was accustomed to rooms becoming quiet when he entered them, but tonight the silence felt different. This was supposed to be the evening he formally announced his engagement to Vanessa. Instead, his future wife had been slapped by a maid in front of Chicago's wealthiest families. When Ethan reached the marble floor, his attention settled on Grace. "What's your name?" "Grace Carter." "You work for the catering agency?" "The domestic staffing company, sir. Today is my first shift." "And you believed striking a guest was part of your job?" Grace felt every eye in the room pressing against her. She thought of the overdue hospital bill folded inside her purse. Her younger brother, Noah, needed surgery within 6 weeks. Losing this position meant losing the highest-paying job she had been offered in months. Still, she refused to lie. "No, sir." "Then explain why you did it." "Because she hit me first." Vanessa gave a disbelieving laugh. "She insulted me and interfered with security." Grace's voice remained steady. "I asked her to release an elderly woman she was hurting. I was protecting this house. By throwing someone into a blizzard?" A murmur moved through the guests. Vanessa stepped forward. "You have no idea who you're speaking to." "That's exactly the problem," Grace replied. "You believe your name gives you permission to treat people as if they don't matter." Vanessa's expression hardened. "Ethan, fire her." Grace finally looked directly at him. His face revealed almost nothing, but there was something cold and deeply guarded behind his eyes. He looked like a man who judged every person in front of him before allowing them close enough to disappoint him. "I understand if you dismiss me," Grace said, "but I won't apologize for stopping someone from being abused. You struck my fiancée. After she struck me, you could have called security. Security was preparing to drag an innocent woman into the snow because Miss Collins told them to." Vanessa turned toward the guards. "Remove her now." 2 security officers approached. Grace's stomach tightened. For 1 second, fear nearly overcame her. She could already imagine calling the hospital and asking for more time. She could hear Noah pretending not to be disappointed because he knew how hard she was trying. But before the officers reached her, the elderly woman stepped out from behind Grace. "That will be enough." Her voice was quiet, yet it carried across the ballroom with more authority than Vanessa's shouting ever had. One of the guards stopped immediately. The other lowered his gaze. Vanessa stared at them. "Why are you standing there? Take both of them outside." The woman removed her damp gloves, 1 finger at a time. "You really don't recognize me, do you, Vanessa?" Something changed in Ethan's face. "Mother?" Grace turned so quickly that she nearly lost her balance. The elderly stranger straightened her shoulders. Beneath the worn coat, she carried herself with the effortless dignity of someone who had never needed expensive clothing to establish her importance. Eleanor Whitmore had returned from Boston 2 days earlier than expected. She was not a trespasser. She was Ethan's mother, the widow of Jonathan Whitmore, and the woman who still owned the mansion in which Vanessa had ordered her thrown into the snow. Color drained from Vanessa's face. "Eleanor? You called me a beggar. I didn't know it was you." Eleanor looked down at the red marks around her wrist. "No, you didn't." Vanessa rushed toward her. "I'm so sorry. Your coat in the staff entrance, I thought there'd been a security mistake." Eleanor stepped away before Vanessa could touch her. "That is not an apology. It is an explanation for why you believed cruelty was acceptable. I would never have treated you that way if I had known." "That," Eleanor said, "is precisely what concerns me." The room grew painfully quiet again. Ethan looked from his mother to Vanessa, then to Grace. He had expected fear, excuses, perhaps even tears from the young maid. Instead, Grace stood with her shoulders straight, prepared to accept the consequences of defending someone she had believed possessed no power at all. Vanessa attempted to regain control. "This girl still assaulted me. Whatever misunderstanding happened between us, she cannot remain employed after behaving like an animal." Grace flinched at the insult but said nothing. Eleanor noticed. "So that is how you speak to the employees who maintain the home you hope to enter through marriage?" Vanessa forced a strained smile. "I was frightened and embarrassed. I didn't mean it. You meant every word until you discovered who was listening." Ethan stepped closer to his mother. "Are you injured?" "My wrist will bruise. My judgment, however, has become considerably clearer. Mother, this is neither the time nor the place." "This is exactly the place, and apparently it is long past time." Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. "Ethan, please don't let her turn this into something it isn't." Ethan remained silent. Grace lowered her gaze. She did not belong in this family dispute, and she wanted nothing more than to collect her coat and leave with whatever dignity she still possessed. "I'll go," she said. "I understand the company will be informed." She picked up the silver tray she had placed on a nearby table. Her fingers shook as she straightened the glasses that had shifted. Eleanor watched her carefully. "You need this job, don't you?" Grace paused. "That has nothing to do with what happened. It has everything to do with it. You knew defending me could cost you your position, yet you did it anyway." Grace swallowed. "My brother needs surgery. I need every shift I can get. But needing money doesn't mean I should ignore what's wrong." For the first time that evening, Ethan's expression softened only slightly, but enough for Eleanor to notice. Vanessa noticed it too. "Ethan, this is absurd. She is using some sad story to manipulate your mother." Grace turned toward her. "I didn't tell anyone about my brother until Mrs. Whitmore asked. You expect us to believe that?" "I don't expect anything from you." Eleanor moved to Grace's side. "Then let me make my decision clear. Grace Carter will not be dismissed." Vanessa stared at her. "You cannot be serious." "I have never been more serious." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Mother, Grace violated the agency's conduct policy. And your fiancé physically assaulted both an employee and the owner of this house." A few guests quietly lowered their glasses. Vanessa looked around and realized the story was already escaping her control. By morning, everyone in Chicago society would know what had happened. Eleanor placed a hand gently on Grace's shoulder. "She will remain here under my direct authority." Grace looked at her in disbelief. "Mrs. Whitmore, I appreciate what you're doing, but I don't want special treatment." "This is not special treatment. It is an opportunity for me to decide whether the courage you showed tonight is matched by your character." Ethan studied his mother. He knew that tone. She was no longer defending a maid. She was beginning an investigation. Vanessa knew it too. Eleanor looked toward the musicians. "Continue the evening." The quartet resumed playing, but the celebration never recovered. Conversations became whispers. Guests avoided Vanessa's eyes, while Grace returned to work under the weight of dozens of curious stares. As she carried a fresh tray toward the dining room, she passed Eleanor near the staircase. "Thank you," Grace said quietly. Eleanor's answer was barely above a whisper. "Don't thank me yet. By tomorrow morning, everyone in this house will have chosen a side." Grace glanced across the ballroom. Vanessa stood beside Ethan, smiling for the guests, but her eyes were fixed on Grace with a hatred too deep to hide. Grace had survived the first night without losing her job. What she did not yet understand was that Vanessa Collins had no intention of allowing her to survive the second. By the time the final car disappeared beyond the iron gates, the storm had covered the Whitmore estate in fresh snow. The ballroom still smelled of roses and champagne, but the celebration was over. Grace Carter pushed a cart of empty glasses through the service hallway, while the other workers avoided her eyes. Her cheek still burned where Vanessa had struck her, yet the pain mattered less than the fear that she had lost the only job capable of paying for Noah's surgery. She had almost reached the kitchen when Martha Lewis, the house manager, stopped her. "Mrs. Whitmore wants to see you." "Am I being fired?" "If she wanted you gone, security would already have your coat." Martha led her through a quiet corridor lined with family photographs. They showed Ethan as a boy, Eleanor beside her late husband, and Summers at a lake. The Whitmores looked warmer in those pictures than they had in the ballroom. Inside the library, Eleanor sat beside the fireplace with ice wrapped around her bruised wrist. Ethan stood near the window. Vanessa sat across from them, her white dress still perfect except for the red mark on her cheek. "Sit down, Grace," Eleanor said. Grace obeyed. "Tell me what happened before I entered the ballroom." Vanessa leaned forward. "We already know." I asked Grace. Grace took a breath. "I heard an argument near the entrance. Miss Collins said you were trespassing. You told security you were expected, but no one listened. She grabbed your wrist, so I asked her to let go." "You ordered me," Vanessa said. "I asked first." "And then?" Eleanor continued. "She told me people like me should know our place. Then she hit me." Eleanor looked at Vanessa. "Did you strike her first?" Vanessa stiffened. "She was disrespectful." "That was not my question." "Yes, but she provoked me." Ethan turned from the window. "And you struck her back?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because she hit me, and because she was still hurting your mother." "So you were angry?" "I was angry. I did not lose control." Vanessa stared at Ethan. "Are you going to let a maid speak to me like this?" He did not answer. Eleanor studied Grace. "Do you regret it?" Grace knew an apology might protect her job, but she could not lie. "I regret causing a scene in your home. I regret that it happened during your son's engagement party, but I do not regret stopping her." Vanessa rose. "This is unbelievable." "Sit down," Eleanor said. Vanessa obeyed. Eleanor turned to Ethan. "You wanted the truth. Now you have it. I had the truth in the ballroom." "No, You had a public disaster. He crossed his arms. What do you expect me to do? Understand what your fiancé revealed. Vanessa's face tightened. I made one mistake. You attacked a woman because you believed she had no money, no status, and no one important enough to defend her. I thought she was dangerous. Eleanor lifted her bruised wrist. Did I look dangerous? You entered through the staff door wearing an old coat. Reporters have tried to get inside before. And that gave you the right to drag me into a blizzard? I was protecting this family. No, Eleanor said. You were protecting your sense of superiority. Vanessa looked at Ethan, but he remained silent. Grace stood. I should leave. Not yet, Eleanor said. Then she faced Vanessa. You owe Grace an apology. Vanessa stared at her. I apologize to you. I am not Grace. The humiliation showed across Vanessa's face. Finally, she looked at Grace. I am sorry this situation became physical, and I should not have hit you. Thank you, Grace said. The words were empty, but forcing sincerity from someone was impossible. You may go upstairs now, Eleanor said. Vanessa rose. Before leaving, she stopped beside Grace and whispered, You should have taken the dismissal when you had the chance. Grace met her gaze without responding. When the door closed, Ethan faced his mother. What are you trying to accomplish? I am trying to keep you from marrying a stranger. You are judging her by one terrible moment. I am judging her by the person she became when she believed no one important was watching. Ethan looked away. Eleanor rose carefully. You investigate every executive before allowing them into your company. You examine hidden clauses and financial risks. Yet you are ready to marry someone because she looks perfect beside you. Marriage is not a business deal. No, it is far more dangerous. Grace moved toward the door. This has nothing to do with me. It began with you, Eleanor replied. You defended me when you expected no reward. Ethan studied Grace. And within hours, my mother is offering you protection. Grace understood the accusation. You think I planned this? I think people become creative around wealth. My brother needs heart surgery. I need a paycheck. That is why I am here. Everyone has a story. Yes, Grace said, but not everyone is lying. Eleanor turned to Martha. The agency assigned Grace for 2 weeks? Yes, ma'am. Extend it to 3 months. Increase her hourly rate. She will work directly under you. Grace stared at her. I do not want charity. This is employment. Martha has needed an assistant for months. I am not trained for permanent household work. You are observant, disciplined, and brave. Those qualities are harder to teach. Ethan stepped closer. Mother, this is impulsive. So was your engagement. The words struck harder than anyone expected. Grace looked between them. What if Miss Collins objects? She will, Eleanor said. But this is my house. Ethan remained silent before finally agreeing. 3 months, probationary. Martha supervises everything. The pay could cover nearly half of Noah's surgical deposit. I accept, Grace said. By 7 the next morning, Grace was back at work. The storm had weakened, leaving Chicago beneath a heavy gray sky. Vanessa sat alone in the breakfast room, wearing a silk robe and scrolling through her phone. You are late, Vanessa said. Grace checked the clock. It is 6:58. You should arrive before I need you. The schedule says 7. In this house, competent people anticipate. Grace poured the coffee. Would you like cream? I would like someone qualified. Grace stayed silent. Vanessa deliberately pushed the cup sideways. Coffee spread across the white tablecloth and dripped onto the floor. Clean it. Grace took a cloth and knelt. You enjoyed last night, Vanessa said. No. You humiliated me and received a raise. I would have preferred finishing the evening without being hit. Vanessa leaned closer. 3 months is a long time. People make mistakes when they are tired. Things break. Jewelry disappears. Employers lose trust. Grace slowly stood. Is that a threat? It is advice. Then here is mine. If you want me gone, ask Mrs. Whitmore. Do not invent a reason. You think she will protect you forever? I do not need forever. I need 3 months. Grace carried the ruined tablecloth away, unaware Ethan had been standing in the hallway. He had heard enough to know Vanessa's apology had changed nothing, but not enough to decide whether Grace was innocent or simply clever. Over the next several days, Vanessa became more careful. Flowers were moved after Grace arranged them. Beds were stripped after she made them. A silver spoon vanished from the dining room and reappeared beneath towels in the laundry. Each time, Vanessa reacted with polished concern. Perhaps the pressure is too much for you. Grace refused to accuse her without proof. Martha noticed. You are being targeted, she said while they folded linens. I know. Why have you not reported it? Because I cannot prove it. Mrs. Whitmore would believe you. Being believed is not the same as proving the truth. Martha studied her with approval. Most people in this house rely on reputation. I have never had one powerful enough to rely on. During the second week, Eleanor began asking Grace to help with medication and appointments. Eleanor learned that Grace had left college to care for her mother through ovarian cancer. Noah's heart condition consumed every dollar she saved. Do you ever resent being the one who stays? Eleanor asked. Sometimes, Grace admitted. Then I feel guilty. You should not. Love can be real and still exhaust you. From the doorway, Ethan watched his mother laugh with Grace. He noticed Grace remembering Eleanor's tea, helping an elderly groundskeeper, and protecting a dishwasher who had broken expensive glasses. That evening, Vanessa entered Ethan's study and warned him that Grace was using sympathy to gain access to the family. You sound threatened, Ethan said. I am protecting you. Ethan agreed to watch Grace more carefully. Vanessa left his study and crossed the east hallway into the unused music room. Lucas Reed, Ethan's oldest friend and chief financial officer, was waiting beside the fireplace. Grace is turning Eleanor against me, Vanessa said. Then remove her. She does not scare easily. Everyone scares when they have something to lose. Lucas suggested framing Grace for theft. Ethan never forgave betrayal, and Eleanor could defend a courageous maid but not a thief. Outside the locked room, Grace stopped with clean towels in her arms. She recognized Lucas's voice and heard him say, Once Ethan signs the voting agreement after the wedding, we will not have to pretend much longer. Then Vanessa asked, And the baby? Lucas answered, That depends on whose child Ethan believes it is. Grace's heart pounded. Vanessa was hiding another man inside the mansion and planning to use a child to trap Ethan. Before Grace could step away, the music room door began to open. For the first time, Grace realized the danger inside the mansion was only beginning. The music room door opened before Grace had time to move. She stepped behind a marble column, pressing the folded towels against her chest as Lucas entered the hallway. He paused, adjusted the cuff of his charcoal suit, and looked in both directions. For one terrifying second, Grace thought he had heard her breathing. Then Vanessa appeared behind him. You need to leave through the side entrance, she whispered. Ethan is still awake. Lucas gave her an irritated look. You are becoming careless. And you are becoming arrogant. He leaned closer. Remember who created this plan. Vanessa's expression hardened. And remember who has to marry him. Lucas walked away without answering. Vanessa remained in the doorway for several seconds before closing it behind her. Grace waited until the sound of their footsteps disappeared. Her legs felt unsteady, but her mind was painfully clear. Vanessa was involved with Lucas. A voting agreement would be signed after the wedding. And there was a baby, whose father Ethan might be tricked into believing was his. Grace knew enough to understand the danger, but not enough to prove it. If she confronted Vanessa, the woman would deny everything. If she told Ethan, he might accuse her of trying to destroy his engagement. He already believed poor people could become creative around wealth. A maid claiming that his fiancée was carrying another man's child would sound exactly like the kind of manipulation he expected. Grace returned the towels to the linen room and found Martha reviewing the next morning's schedule. You look pale, Martha said. I'm tired. That is not the same thing. Grace glanced toward the open doorway. Is Mrs. Whitmore still awake? In the sunroom. Grace hesitated. Martha lowered her clipboard. What happened? I need to speak to her privately. Eleanor was seated beside the dark windows when Grace entered. Snow reflected the moonlight across the garden, turning the grounds almost silver. You heard something, Eleanor said before Grace could speak. Grace stopped. How did you know? You have spent 2 weeks refusing to complain. You would not come to me after midnight unless it mattered. Grace closed the door. I saw Lucas Reed leaving the music room with Vanessa. Eleanor's expression remained calm, but her fingers tightened around the arm of the chair. Are you certain? Yes. What did you hear? Grace repeated the conversation as precisely as she could. She did not exaggerate or add meaning to the words. When she finished, Eleanor stared toward the snowy garden. Lucas has been beside Ethan for 12 years, she said. He was there when the company nearly failed. Ethan trusts him more than almost anyone. Then he won't believe me. He may not. And Vanessa mentioned a baby. Eleanor looked at her. She did not say she was pregnant. No, but Lucas said it depended on whose child Ethan believed it was. That could mean several things. None of them sound innocent. Eleanor rose and walked slowly across the room. Have you told anyone else? No. Do not. Grace stared at her. Mrs. Whitmore, if your son is in danger, then we protect him with evidence, not accusations. Grace understood the logic, but it frightened her. What if they act before we find proof? Then we watch them closely. Eleanor turned back to her. Vanessa already considers you a threat. If she realizes you heard that conversation, she will move against you. She has been trying to do that since the party. No. Until now. She wanted you dismissed. After tonight, she may need you discredited. The distinction sent a chill through Grace. Eleanor reached for her phone. I will have our attorney quietly review the voting agreement. I will also examine recent financial transfers connected to Lucas. And Vanessa? You continue behaving as though you know nothing. Grace shook her head. I am not good at pretending. You do not need to pretend. You only need to remain silent. The following morning, Grace entered the breakfast room carrying a tray of fruit and coffee. Vanessa sat beside Ethan, speaking about wedding invitations as though nothing had happened. Lucas arrived moments later. Grace kept her gaze lowered, but she felt both of them watching her. Good morning, Grace, Lucas said. His friendliness was new. Good morning, Mr. Reed. You were working late last night. So were many people. I thought I saw you near the east hallway. Grace poured Ethan's coffee without spilling a drop. I delivered towels to the guest rooms. Lucas smiled. Of course. Vanessa lifted her cup. Grace is very dedicated. She likes being close to every part of the house. Ethan looked between them. Grace knew the conversation was a trap. Martha assigns my schedule, she said. I go where I'm told. Vanessa's smile remained in place, but her eyes turned cold. After breakfast, Eleanor called Ethan into the library. Grace passed the closed door several times, but heard only fragments of their argument. You are searching for reasons to dislike her, Ethan said. I am asking you to slow down. The wedding is in 6 weeks. Then 6 weeks is enough time to be certain. When Ethan emerged, frustration shadowed his face. He found Grace arranging flowers in the hall. What did you tell my mother? Grace turned. About what? Vanessa. Nothing. She has not seen herself. That is not an answer. It is the only answer I can give. Ethan stepped closer. My mother has questioned the wedding date, Lucas's financial authority, and the new voting agreement. That began after you spoke with her last night. Grace's pulse quickened. Then ask Mrs. Whitmore why. I am asking you. She wanted to tell him everything. She wanted to warn him that the two people nearest to him might be working together, but without proof, the truth would sound like jealousy. I think you should read every document before you sign it, she said. His eyes narrowed. Are you implying Lucas is dishonest? I am saying trust should not replace verification. You sound like my mother. Maybe she has a reason. Ethan studied her for a long moment. Be careful, Grace. Concern can become interference very quickly, and trust can become blindness. He walked away without replying. From the upper landing, Vanessa had heard enough. That afternoon, she entered Grace's room while the staff gathered downstairs for a fire safety briefing. She opened the small wardrobe, moved aside 2 faded uniforms, and placed a velvet jewelry case beneath a stack of folded sweaters. Inside was a diamond bracelet worth more than Grace earned in several years. Lucas waited outside the door. Make sure the camera footage disappears, Vanessa whispered. It will. And the search? Martha will discover the bracelet herself. Vanessa closed the wardrobe. When Ethan sees that Grace is a thief, Nothing she says about us will matter. Downstairs, Grace stood beside Eleanor, unaware that the trap had already been set. Eleanor leaned toward her. Our attorney found something unusual. Lucas revised the voting agreement last month without informing Ethan. Grace looked toward the staircase. Before she could respond, Martha entered the room carrying an empty velvet jewelry box. Her face was grave. Mrs. Whitmore, we have a serious problem. Vanessa followed behind her, pretending to be frightened. My diamond bracelet is missing. Every employee was ordered to remain inside the mansion while security searched the staff rooms. Grace felt Vanessa's eyes settle on her. And for the first time, she understood exactly what Eleanor had meant. Vanessa no longer wanted her dismissed. She wanted Grace branded as a criminal before she could reveal the truth. The search began before Grace had time to defend herself. Security locked every exterior door, and the household staff were ordered to remain in the main hall while their rooms and lockers were inspected. No one spoke above a whisper. Some employees looked nervous because being searched was humiliating. Others looked relieved because they assumed the missing bracelet would be found far away from them. Vanessa stood beside Ethan with one hand pressed dramatically against her chest. It was in my dressing room this morning, she said. I left it beside my watch while I took a shower. When I came back, it was gone. Who had access to the room? Ethan asked. Only the household staff. Her eyes moved toward Grace for less than a second. That was enough. Grace felt the accusation before anyone spoke it aloud. Eleanor stood near the fireplace, watching Vanessa with a stillness that made her difficult to read. Lucas remained beside the staircase, speaking quietly with the head of security as though he were helping solve the problem. Grace knew better. He was not searching for a thief. He was directing everyone toward the person Vanessa had chosen. Martha approached Grace. They're checking the staff bedrooms now. I understand. You do not have anything in your room that could be misunderstood? Grace almost laughed at the question. I own 2 uniforms, a winter coat, 3 books, and an unpaid hospital bill. Martha lowered her voice. Then stay calm. Grace glanced at Vanessa. She wants them to find something. Martha's face tightened, but before she could respond, one of the guards entered the hall carrying a velvet jewelry case. The room fell silent. Vanessa covered her mouth. My bracelet. The guard looked uncomfortable. Where was it found? Ethan asked. The man hesitated. In Miss Carter's room, sir. Every face turned toward Grace. For a moment, she could not hear anything except the pounding of her own heart. That is impossible, she said. The guard opened the case. A diamond bracelet lay inside, catching the chandelier light. Vanessa stepped backward, as if Grace had personally betrayed her. You stole from me. No, they found it in your wardrobe. I did not put it there. Ethan's expression changed. Whatever uncertainty had existed in his eyes disappeared behind something colder. Grace, he said, is there any reason that bracelet would be in your room? No. Did you enter Vanessa's suite today? I brought fresh towels at 8 this morning. Martha assigned me. Vanessa looked at him. She knew exactly where I kept my jewelry. I did not touch it. Lucas stepped forward with practiced reluctance. Ethan, we should not discuss this in front of the entire staff. Grace looked at him. He wore the same calm expression he used during business meetings, but she noticed one missing button on the cuff of his charcoal suit. The empty thread caught her attention. Before she could study it more closely, Ethan ordered everyone, except Grace, Vanessa, Eleanor, Lucas, and Martha, to leave the room. The staff filed out slowly. Some avoided Grace's eyes. A few looked at her with open disappointment. That hurt more than she expected. She had worked beside them, covered their shifts, shared meals with them, and protected one of them from being fired. Now one expensive object had erased all of it. When the doors closed, Ethan turned to her. I gave you an opportunity after you assaulted my fiancée. You gave me probation because your mother insisted. And this is how you repay her trust? Eleanor stepped between them. Do not decide the answer before asking the question. The bracelet was in Grace's room. That proves where it was found, not who placed it there. Vanessa stared at Eleanor. You cannot seriously defend her now. I can defend the need for evidence. The evidence is in that box. Grace faced Ethan. "Check the security cameras." Lucas spoke before Ethan could answer. "There is a problem with the East Wing footage." Grace looked at him sharply. "What problem?" "The recording system failed for approximately 40 minutes this morning." "Of course it did," she said. Lucas's expression hardened. "Are you accusing me of something?" "I am saying that the only camera that could prove who entered my room happened to stop working." Ethan looked at Lucas. "When did you learn about the failure?" "Security informed me during the search." "Why were you involved?" "The company installed the mansion's security network. They called me because you were occupied." Grace watched the exchange carefully. Lucas had an answer for everything. Vanessa pointed at her. "She is trying to shift blame because she was caught. I did not steal your bracelet. You hated me from the moment I disciplined you. You slapped me and tried to throw Mrs. Whitmore into a snowstorm. And now you are taking revenge." Grace almost stepped toward her, but Martha placed a hand on her arm. "Do not," Martha whispered. Ethan walked to the windows. Snow fell beyond the glass, soft and silent, while the room behind him became increasingly hostile. "Grace," he said without turning around, "until this is resolved, you are suspended." Her chest tightened. "My brother's surgery. I cannot allow you to remain in the house after property was found in your room. You already decided I am guilty. I decided there is enough evidence to remove you temporarily." Vanessa gave a faint smile. Grace saw it. "You planned this," she said. Vanessa's smile vanished. "Be careful." "No, you should be careful. You think that bracelet makes every other truth disappear." Ethan turned. "What does that mean?" Grace looked at Eleanor. They had agreed not to make accusations without proof, but remaining silent now made her appear desperate and dishonest. "It means there are things happening in this house that you do not see." Lucas stepped forward. "This is becoming ridiculous." Grace faced him. "Is it?" Ethan's patience broke. "Enough. If you have something to say it clearly." Grace could feel Eleanor silently warning her to wait. She chose her words carefully. "Read the voting agreement before you sign it." Lucas's face barely changed, but his shoulders stiffened. Ethan noticed. "What does the voting agreement have to do with a stolen bracelet?" "I do not know yet." "Then stop making vague accusations. I am trying to stop you from trusting the wrong people." Vanessa laughed bitterly. "You were here for 2 weeks, and now you think you understand his life?" "No, but I understand what people sound like when they are hiding something." Lucas looked at Ethan. "She's attempting to create confusion because she knows the police could be called." "The police should be called," Grace said. "They can test the bracelet, examine the cameras, and question everyone." Vanessa hesitated. It lasted only a fraction of a second, but Eleanor saw it. "So you agree?" Eleanor asked her. Vanessa recovered quickly. "Of course, I want justice." Eleanor looked toward the bracelet. "Then no one touches it again." Lucas closed the case. "We should secure it." "You should put it down," Eleanor said. For the first time, Lucas looked openly irritated. Ethan took the case from him and placed it on the table. "We will not involve the police tonight," he said. "Not until our attorney reviews the situation." Grace stared at him. "Why?" "Because a police investigation would become public. It would affect the wedding, the company, and every person in this house. Then your reputation matters more than the truth." "That is not what I said. It is what you decided." His face hardened again. "You are suspended. Martha will collect your belongings." Grace wanted to argue, but the room had already closed around her. Ethan did not trust her. Vanessa wanted her destroyed. Lucas controlled the missing footage. Only Eleanor and Martha believed she might be innocent, and neither could prove it. Grace removed the house key from her pocket and placed it on the table. "I did not steal anything." Ethan said nothing. She turned toward Eleanor. "I am sorry." "You have nothing to apologize for," Eleanor replied. Vanessa folded her arms. "That remains to be seen." Grace walked out before anger made her say something she could not take back. Martha followed her upstairs. Inside the small staff room, Grace began packing her few belongings into an old canvas bag. Her hands shook as she folded the uniforms. She thought of Noah waiting for her call. She would have to tell him the surgery deposit was no longer coming. Martha stood near the doorway. I do not believe you took it. Thank you. We will find the truth. Vanessa and Lucas control the story. Ethan trusts them. Trust can change. Not before the hospital deadline. Grace opened the wardrobe and removed her sweaters. Beneath the bottom shelf, something small reflected the light. She reached down and picked it up. A dark silver cuff button. Martha leaned closer. What is that? Grace turned it over in her palm. The back was engraved with 2 letters. Le, Re, Lucas Reed. Grace remembered seeing the empty thread on his cuff downstairs. He was in this room. Martha's expression changed. Are you certain this belongs to him? I saw the missing button on his suit. Martha took a clean handkerchief and carefully wrapped the button without touching it directly. This could prove he planted the bracelet. Or he will claim he lost it somewhere else and someone brought it here. Then we need more. Grace looked around the room. What about the hallway cameras? The East Wing recording was deleted. Deleted or failed. Martha understood. You think Lucas lied? He oversees the company that installed the system. If anyone could remove one section without damaging everything else, it would be him. Martha lowered her voice. There is an older backup server in the maintenance office. Mr. Whitmore's father installed it years ago. Lucas may not know it still records entrance logs. Can we access it? Not without authorization. Mrs. Whitmore can authorize it. Martha nodded. They did not leave through the main staircase. Martha led Grace down a narrow service passage that ended near Eleanor's private sitting room. Eleanor was waiting. Martha placed the wrapped button on the desk. We found this beneath Grace's wardrobe. Eleanor examined the engraving. Lucas. He is missing a cuff button, Grace said. I saw it during the confrontation. Eleanor's eyes sharpened. You should not have touched it. I only touched the edges. We will preserve it, Martha. Contact Henry Walsh. Tell him to come through the west entrance. Your attorney and a private investigator. Grace looked at her. You already have one? I was married to a technology executive for 32 years. Suspicion was practically a household expense. Despite everything, Grace almost smiled. Eleanor turned serious again. You cannot stay here tonight. Vanessa will assume you have left Chicago. I live 40 minutes away. She may send someone to watch you. Why would she care where I go? Because if she and Lucas planted that bracelet, they will want to know whether you found anything. Grace looked down at the button. I cannot disappear. My brother needs me. I am not asking you to disappear. I am asking you to let us protect you while we investigate. Grace hated the idea of depending on the Whitmores, but Eleanor was right. What will you tell Ethan? Nothing yet. Grace stared at her. He suspended me. And if I confront him without proof, he will defend Lucas. My son's loyalty is admirable until someone uses it against him. That evening, Grace went home under the supervision of a private driver Eleanor trusted. She found Noah asleep on the couch with a medical brochure open across his chest. He woke when she entered. You are home early. The event schedule changed. You look upset. I am tired. Noah, set up. Did something happen at work? Grace placed her bag beside the door. I was suspended. His face fell. Why? Someone put an expensive bracelet in my room. You did not take it. I know. Do they? Not yet. Noah looked away, trying to hide his fear. What about the surgery? We will find another way. You always say that, because there is always another way. What if there is not? Grace sat beside him. Then I make one. He leaned against her shoulder. I hate that you have to do everything. I do not. That is a lie. She closed her eyes. Yes, she whispered. It is. Across the city, the Whitmore mansion had become quieter than a courthouse after a verdict. Vanessa poured herself a glass of wine in Ethan's private sitting room. She had changed into a black dress and removed every piece of jewelry except her engagement ring. Ethan stood near the fireplace. Did you ever suspect Grace before today? He asked. Vanessa paused. She was always too interested in this family. That was not my question. No, I did not know she was a thief. You said she might manipulate my mother. Because she was? Manipulation is not theft. Vanessa placed down her glass. Why are you questioning me instead of her? Because the camera failed at the exact time the bracelet disappeared. That is Lucas's department. not mine. And Lucas happened to be in the mansion. He is here almost every day. Ethan studied her. Vanessa moved closer and softened her voice. You are letting your mother's suspicion infect you. My mother was right about how you treated her. I apologized. You explained. Vanessa's eyes filled with carefully controlled tears. I made one terrible mistake, and now every word I say is being examined like evidence. Ethan looked away. She touched his arm. We are 6 weeks from our wedding. This should be the happiest time of our lives. It does not feel happy. Vanessa's expression flickered. Then let us fix that. She kissed him, but Ethan remained distant. When she left the room, she went directly to Lucas's office in the East Wing. He was reviewing files on his laptop. You said he would believe the bracelet, she whispered. He suspended her. He is still asking questions. Questions are not proof. Eleanor is investigating the voting agreement. Lucas closed the computer. How do you know? Grace mentioned it in front of Ethan. Then she heard more than we thought. Vanessa began pacing. She could destroy everything, not if no one believes her. She has Eleanor. And you have Ethan. Not completely. Lucas watched her. Then we move faster. The wedding? The voting agreement. He will not sign while he is suspicious. Lucas leaned back. Then give him a reason to stop thinking. Vanessa looked at him. What are you suggesting? You told me Ethan still insists on waiting until marriage. Her face tightened. Yes, and you are already pregnant. Do not say it like that. The pregnancy will become visible soon. You need a believable timeline. Vanessa looked toward the closed door. There is to die in line unless he thinks we slept together. Then make him think it. She stared at Lucas. He will remember that we did not. Not if he does not remember the night. Vanessa's face went pale. You want me to drug him? I want you to protect the future you have worked for. That could kill him, not with the correct dose. Lucas opened a desk drawer and removed a small glass vial. Vanessa stared at it. What is that? Something that causes confusion, fatigue, and memory loss. Mixed with alcohol, it will make the rest easy. She did not take it. Lucas placed the vial on the desk between them. You said Ethan was your golden ticket. Tickets expire. Vanessa looked at the vial again. And afterward, you tell him you were together. A month later, you announce the pregnancy. He marries you before anyone asks questions. What about Grace? She is already a thief. And Eleanor? Once you are carrying what Ethan believes is the Whitmore heir, Eleanor's opinion will matter much less. Vanessa slowly reached for the vial. Neither of them noticed the maintenance camera above the office doorway. It was old, nearly hidden behind a brass light fixture, and connected to a server Lucas believed had been removed years earlier. In the basement, the forgotten system continued recording, and while Grace believed she had been driven out of the Whitmore mansion, Vanessa had just begun the most dangerous part of her plan. The hidden camera in the East Wing had recorded more than Lucas realized. At 9 the next morning, Eleanor sat in the mansion's basement security room beside Henry Walsh, the family attorney, and a private investigator named David Mercer. The old backup server hummed beneath layers of dust while Martha stood near the door. Grace watched the monitor from behind them. The footage was grainy and silent, but the image was clear enough. Lucas entered Grace's room during the staff safety meeting. Vanessa followed several minutes later, carrying a small velvet case. When she left, the case was no longer in her hand. Grace felt anger rise inside her, but relief came with it. For the first time, she had proof. Eleanor did not celebrate. Keep watching, she said. David advanced the footage to later that evening. The camera above Lucas's office showed Vanessa entering. Through the narrow glass panel in the door, they could see Lucas removing something from his desk and placing it in her hand. The camera had no audio, but the small glass vial was visible. Henry leaned toward the screen. That could be medication, or something intended for Ethan, Grace said. Eleanor turned to David. Can you enhance the image? I can enlarge it, but we still will not know what is inside. Then we need the vial. Grace stared at the frozen frame. We should tell Ethan now. Eleanor remained silent. You have proof that they framed me, Grace continued. He will listen. He will believe the theft was staged, Eleanor said. That does not prove the affair, the pregnancy, or the purpose of that vial. It proves Lucas and Vanessa are lying. Yes, but if we confront them too early, they will destroy everything else. Grace shook her head. What if they use it before we are ready? Eleanor looked at her. That is why we are not waiting. The engagement celebration was scheduled for that evening. It was smaller than the first party, limited to close friends, board members, and family associates who had been invited to witness Ethan and Vanessa sign a public wedding announcement. Eleanor believed Vanessa would use the event to carry out her plan. Grace was told to remain away from the mansion until they knew exactly what Vanessa intended. She refused. She knows I was suspended, Grace said. She will not expect me to come back. That is precisely why returning is dangerous, Henry replied. My brother is not the one about to be drugged. Eleanor studied her for several seconds. You understand that if Ethan sees you before we have proof, he may have security remove you. Then I will make sure he sees the proof first. David arranged for Grace to enter through the old service tunnel, connecting the detached garage to the basement. Martha would monitor the staff corridors, while Eleanor kept Vanessa occupied. The plan depended on patience. Grace knew patience could become another name for arriving too late. That afternoon, she went home to see Noah before returning to the estate. He was sitting at the kitchen table, pretending to study, while a medical payment notice lay beneath his notebook. You are going back there, he said. Grace stopped. How did you know? You only wear that expression when you have decided to do something dangerous. It is not dangerous. Then why are you lying again? She sat across from him. I found evidence that proves I did not steal the bracelet. That is good. But the people who framed me may be planning to hurt someone. Noah closed his book. Call the police. We do not know what is in the vial. What vial? Grace realized she had said too much. Noah stared at her. You are going back into a house where someone framed you and may be carrying drugs? I will not be alone. That is not an answer. Noah, if anything happens to you, none of this matters. The fear in his voice cut through her. Grace reached across the table and took his hand. I have spent years trying to protect you. I know that sometimes it feels like I forget to protect myself. You do forget. I will be careful. You always say that, and I always come home. He looked away. That does not mean you always will. Grace had no promise strong enough to erase his fear. She squeezed his hand. I have to stop them before someone gets hurt. Noah nodded reluctantly. Then come back. I will. By 6 that evening, the Whitmore mansion had transformed again. Soft gold lights illuminated the ballroom. A jazz trio played near the staircase. Servers moved between guests with trays of champagne, and white roses covered the dining tables. Vanessa descended from the upper floor wearing a fitted red gown. The bruising on her cheek had faded, and her smile had returned with careful perfection. She looked like a woman prepared to become part of one of Chicago's most powerful families. Only Eleanor knew she was carrying another man's child. Only Grace knew how far she might go to hide it. Ethan stood near the fireplace, speaking with members of the board. He wore a black tuxedo and the distant expression of a man attending his own celebration as an obligation. Since suspending Grace, he had slept badly. The evidence against her appeared simple, yet every part of it troubled him. The missing footage, Lucas's involvement, Grace's insistence that he review the voting agreement. That morning, Ethan had asked Lucas for the newest version of the document. Lucas claimed the legal department was still finalizing it. For the first time in 12 years, Ethan wondered whether his closest friend was avoiding a direct request. Vanessa approached and placed her hand through his arm. You look tense. There are board issues. Tonight is not about work. Everything connected to this family becomes work eventually. She smiled, but her eyes remained watchful. You need to relax. I will after the announcement. Vanessa looked across the room toward Lucas. He gave her a nearly invisible nod. The vial was hidden inside her evening bag. In the basement, Grace entered through the service tunnel, wearing a black catering uniform, borrowed from one of David's assistants. Her hair was tucked beneath a simple cap, and she carried an empty tray to cover her face if necessary. Martha met her near the wine cellar. Vanessa is in the ballroom. Lucas has moved between his office and the bar twice. Where is Eleanor? Keeping Ethan near the board members. Grace glanced toward the ceiling. Did David find out what was in the vial? Not yet. Then we assume the worst. Martha handed her a small wireless earpiece. David will watch the cameras. Do not approach Vanessa unless she makes a move. Grace inserted it. David's voice came through softly. I can see you. Take the west staircase and wait near the service bar. Grace moved through the corridor, keeping her face turned away from guests. She reached the ballroom and stopped behind a decorative screen near the bar. From there, she could see Vanessa. For nearly 20 minutes, nothing happened. Vanessa laughed with guests, posed for photographs, and remained close to Ethan. Lucas circulated through the room, greeting investors and behaving like a loyal friend. Grace began to question whether Eleanor had misjudged the timing. Then Vanessa touched her evening bag. Lucas walked behind the bar and spoke quietly to one of the servers. A moment later, the young man was sent toward the kitchen to collect more glasses. The bar was briefly unattended. Vanessa placed 2 champagne glasses on the marble counter. She poured from the same bottle into both, then turned her body slightly to block the guest's view. Grace saw her open the bag. Her fingers closed around the vial. David? Grace whispered. I see it. Vanessa removed the cap and emptied several drops into one glass. Get a clear image, Grace said. Already recording. Vanessa stirred the drink with a cocktail pick, then carried both glasses toward Ethan. Grace stepped out from behind the screen. Martha caught her arm. Wait. We need her to hand him the glass. She already prepared it. If we stop her now, she can claim it was medicine for herself. Grace watched Vanessa approach Ethan. What if he drinks before we reach him? Eleanor is watching. Across the room, Eleanor moved closer to her son. Vanessa handed one glass to Ethan. To us, she said. Ethan accepted it, though he did not drink. Vanessa lifted her own glass. To the life we are about to build. The board members around them smiled. Grace moved through the crowd. Every step felt too slow. Ethan raised the glass toward his mouth. Now, David said through the earpiece. Grace pushed past 2 guests and struck the bottom of Ethan's hand. The champagne glass flew across the marble floor and shattered. Gasps spread through the ballroom. Ethan stared at Grace in disbelief. Vanessa's face went pale before rage replaced it. What are you doing here? Grace stood between Ethan and the broken glass. Do not drink anything she gives you. Security began moving toward her. Ethan's expression hardened. You were ordered to stay away from this house. She put something in your champagne. Vanessa laughed sharply. This is insane. I watched you. You broke into the mansion because you could not accept being caught stealing. Grace turned to Ethan. Have the liquid tested. There is nothing to test, Vanessa said. The glass is on the floor. Eleanor stepped forward. No one moves. The command stopped security. She pointed toward the spilled champagne. Collect the liquid in every piece of glass. Vanessa stared at her. You cannot be serious. I have never been more serious. Lucas moved closer. Eleanor, this is becoming another public spectacle. She looked at him. You should be particularly concerned about what that glass contains. His expression changed for only a moment. Ethan saw it. Grace removed the earpiece. There is video. Vanessa's eyes narrowed. What video? The backup security system recorded you entering my room with the bracelet. It also recorded Lucas giving you the vial. The ballroom became silent. Ethan turned slowly toward Lucas. Is that true? Lucas recovered quickly. No, she is lying. David Mercer entered through the side doors carrying a tablet. I am afraid she is not. Eleanor took the tablet and handed it to Ethan. The first recording showed Lucas entering Grace's room. The second showed Vanessa placing the velvet case inside the wardrobe. The third showed Lucas passing her the vial in his office. Ethan watched without speaking. Vanessa stepped toward him. Ethan, I can explain. He looked at her, as though he no longer recognized her. Start with the bracelet. It was Lucas's idea. Lucas turned on her. Do not be stupid. The words confirmed, more than a denial ever could. Vanessa pointed at him. He said Grace was dangerous. He said she was turning your mother against me. Ethan looked at Lucas. You entered her room. Lucas lifted his hands. I was trying to protect you. Grace had already become obsessed with this family. So you planted jewelry? She was making accusations about the voting agreement. What did you change in it? Lucas remained silent. Henry Walsh stepped forward. He altered the transfer provisions. After your marriage, Vanessa would receive temporary voting authority if you became medically incapacitated. Lucas would control several operating decisions as chief financial officer. Ethan's face became cold. You rewrote my company's succession structure. It was designed to protect the board. Without telling me? Lucas said nothing. Vanessa turned toward Ethan. I did not understand the legal details. Grace looked at her. But you understood the vial? Vanessa's eyes filled with tears. It was not what you think. Then tell us what it was, Eleanor said. Vanessa looked toward the shattered glass. It was something to help Ethan relax. Ethan stared at her. You put a drug in my drink without telling me? It was harmless. A physician attending the event stepped forward after examining the residue collected from the floor. We cannot know the exact substance without a laboratory, but the odor and color suggest a sedative solution. Vanessa shook her head. No, Lucas told me it was safe. Ethan's voice dropped. Why did you need me sedated? Vanessa began crying. I was afraid. Of what? She looked toward Lucas. He had already begun moving backward through the crowd. 2 security guards blocked his path. Eleanor faced Vanessa. Tell him about the baby. Ethan turned sharply. What baby? Vanessa stared at her. Grace understood that Eleanor was forcing the final truth into the open. Vanessa pressed a hand to her stomach. I am pregnant. Ethan's face changed. The room seemed to disappear around him. He looked at her hand, then back at her face. That is impossible. The words came quietly. Vanessa flinched. Several guests looked away, realizing what his response meant. Ethan took 1 step closer. We have never slept together. Vanessa's tears became more desperate. I know. Then whose child is it? She could not answer. Ethan looked toward Lucas. Lucas's silence answered for her. A board member near the staircase whispered something in disbelief. Ethan's face emptied of emotion. How long? Vanessa shook her head. Please do not do this here. You planned to drug me in front of my family. You do not get to choose where the truth is spoken. She covered her face. 7 months. Ethan turned to Lucas. My closest friend. Lucas's jaw tightened. You were never available. You built a company and expected everyone around you to live in its shadow. So you slept with my fiancée? She came to me. Vanessa looked at him in horror. You said you loved me. I said what you needed to hear. The betrayal shifted again. Vanessa realized Lucas had used her just as she had intended to use Ethan. Ethan looked between them. The child is yours? Lucas refused to answer. Vanessa whispered, yes. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, there was no grief visible, only finality. The engagement is over. Vanessa grabbed his arm. No, Ethan, please. I made mistakes because I was terrified of losing you. You were never afraid of losing me. You were afraid of losing this house, this company, and the life attached to my name. I can change. You tried to drug me and make me claim another man's child. She sank to her knees. I love you. Ethan removed her hand from his sleeve. You do not know what that word means. He turned to security. Take Lucas to the study. Do not allow him near a phone or computer. Contact the police and the company's legal department. Lucas struggled as the guards seized his arms. You cannot do this. I know every weakness in Whitmore Technologies. Ethan looked at him. That is why you will never enter the building again. He faced Vanessa. Pack nothing. Martha will arrange for your belongings to be delivered. Vanessa stood unsteadily. You are throwing me out while I am pregnant? I am removing you from the home you plan to steal. She looked around the ballroom. No one stepped forward to help her. When security escorted Lucas away and Martha led Vanessa toward the stairs, the guests remained frozen in shocked silence. Ethan stared at the broken champagne glass on the floor. Grace stood several feet away, uncertain whether to speak. Finally, he looked at her. You came back after I accused you of theft. You were in danger. I did not believe you. No, I suspended you. Yes. Why did you still stop me? Grace met his eyes. Because saving someone should not depend on whether they treated you fairly. The answer seemed to hurt him more than anger would have. Eleanor approached her son, but Ethan stepped away. I need everyone to leave. Within minutes, the celebration dissolved. Guests collected their coats, avoiding Ethan's eyes as they departed into the snow. Grace remained near the fireplace while investigators collected the broken glass and reviewed the recordings. She expected relief. Instead, she felt exhausted. Ethan stood alone at the far end of the ballroom, surrounded by the remains of another ruined celebration. The first time, Grace had struck the woman he intended to marry. Tonight, she had exposed her. But as Ethan watched the two people he trusted most being taken away, something inside him closed. Vanessa and Lucas had proven that betrayal could wear the faces of love and friendship. And before long, Ethan would begin wondering whether Grace Carter was truly different or simply better at hiding what she wanted. The night Vanessa and Lucas were taken away should have brought Ethan relief. Instead, it left him standing in the center of the ruined ballroom, surrounded by broken glass, wilted roses, and the unbearable knowledge that two people he had trusted had been planning to use him. By morning, the story had already reached the press. Headlines appeared across Chicago before sunrise. Whitmore engagement ends in fraud investigation. Billionaire CEO targeted in alleged sedative plot. Whitmore CFO removed after secret affair exposed. Ethan shut off the television in his study, but the silence did not help. The questions remained. How long had Lucas hated him? Had Vanessa ever loved him? How many conversations had been lies? And why had Grace, the woman he had accused and dismissed, risked everything to save him? A knock sounded at the door. Come in. Eleanor entered carrying 2 cups of coffee. Her bruised wrist had nearly healed, but disappointment remained in her eyes. You have not slept, she said. I have work. You have lawyers and an entire executive team handling the company. I no longer know which members of that team I can trust. Eleanor placed 1 cup on his desk. That does not mean everyone is guilty. It means I failed to see the people who were. You saw what they wanted you to see. That is another way of saying I was blind. Eleanor sat across from him. Grace tried to warn you. His jaw tightened. I know. She returned after you called her a thief. I know. She protected you without knowing whether you would ever apologize. I said I know. Eleanor watched him carefully. Then why have you not asked her to come back? Ethan looked toward the windows. Snowmelt ran down the glass in narrow streams. Because I do not know what she wants. His mother stared at him. She has told you, people say many things when they believe kindness will be rewarded. She believed kindness would cost her everything, and she still chose it. Ethan stood. You did not trust Vanessa from the beginning. I did. Look where that led. So your answer is to trust no one? My answer is to stop pretending motives do not matter. Grace's motives have been clearer than anyone's. Have they? Eleanor's face hardened. Be very careful, Ethan. Pain can make suspicion feel intelligent. He turned away. I am not discussing this. You are not discussing anything. That is the problem. She left him alone with the coffee he never touched. Grace returned to the mansion 2 days later. Not because Ethan asked her. Eleanor did. The police had cleared Grace completely, and the agency had formally apologized for suspending her. Martha restored her position, and Eleanor offered to pay the lost wages. Grace accepted only what she had earned. I do not need compensation for being believed late, she said. Eleanor smiled sadly. You should not have needed to prove yourself at all. Grace resumed her work, but the mansion felt different. Lucas's office remained locked. Vanessa's clothes were gone. Wedding invitations had disappeared from the entry table. Staff members spoke softly, as if raising their voices might awaken the scandal hiding in the walls. Ethan was almost never seen outside his study. When Grace passed him in the hall, he nodded. Nothing more. That distance should have relieved her. Instead, it hurt. She had spent days trying to convince herself that she had protected him only because it was right. That was true, but it was no longer the entire truth. She had begun caring about him, not the billionaire whose name appeared on buildings, the man who brought home soup for her brother and pretended it would have been thrown away. The man who stood beside his mother's chair during medical appointments, even when he answered emails throughout them. The man whose mistrust looked less like arrogance now, and more like an old wound he had never allowed to close. Grace hated herself a little for understanding him. One afternoon, she found Ethan in the kitchen, attempting to make coffee. The machine produced a loud grinding sound and stopped. Grace watched from the doorway. "You broke it." He looked at the machine. It was already unreliable. It worked this morning, then it became unreliable recently. Grace walked over and opened the top. "You forgot to add water." Ethan stared at the empty reservoir. "I was distracted. That is one word for it." She filled the machine and pressed the correct button. Coffee began pouring. "Thank you," he said. "You are welcome." She turned to leave. "Grace." She stopped. "I owe you an apology." She waited. "I should have listened when you warned me. I should have investigated before suspending you." "Yes." Her simple answer surprised him. "I thought you might say it was all right. It was not." "No. You believed the bracelet before you believed my character. The evidence was convenient." Ethan lowered his gaze. "You are right." Grace crossed her arms. "I do not need you to punish yourself. I need you to understand what happened." "I do." "Do you?" He looked at her. She continued. "You were betrayed by Vanessa and Lucas, but before that, you had already decided people with less money were more likely to want something from you. That made it easy for them to frame me." Ethan's face tightened. "I have been used before. So have I. That is different." "Why? Because the people who used me did not steal millions?" "That is not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" He had no answer. Grace turned toward the door. "I accept your apology, but I am not asking for your trust anymore." She walked away before he could respond. Over the next several weeks, Ethan began noticing how much of the mansion depended on Grace. Eleanor's appointments ran on time because Grace tracked every detail. Martha's staff schedule improved because Grace quietly reorganized the busiest shifts. An elderly groundskeeper stopped missing lunch because Grace brought food outside when he refused to enter the formal dining room. She never asked Ethan for anything. Even when Noah's surgery approached and the hospital demanded the final deposit, she worked additional nights through another agency rather than request his help. Ethan discovered this from Martha. "Why did she not tell me?" he asked. "Because you would assume she wanted money." The answer stayed with him. A week later, Ethan drove to the hospital without telling anyone. He found Grace sitting outside the cardiology department with Noah. Her brother was thinner than Ethan expected, but his eyes were alert and intelligent. Grace looked stunned when she saw him. "What are you doing here?" "I had a meeting nearby. There is no Whitmore office near this hospital." "I made a detour." Noah looked between them. "You must be Ethan." Grace's face changed. "What have you told him?" "Only that my boss sometimes forgets to put water in a coffee machine." Ethan almost smiled. Noah extended a hand. "Thank you for not firing her permanently." Grace frowned. "That is a terrible way to introduce yourself." "It is honest." Ethan shook his hand. "I deserved that." A nurse called Noah's name. Grace stood. "I will be back in a few minutes." When she followed the nurse inside, Ethan remained in the waiting room with Noah's worn backpack beside him. He noticed an envelope partially visible inside. The hospital deposit notice. Nearly $12,000 remained unpaid. Grace returned and saw him holding it. "You had no right to look at that." "It fell out." "Then you should have put it back. I can cover the deposit." "No. It would be nothing to me." "That is exactly why I do not want it. Your brother needs surgery, and I will pay for it. You are working 2 jobs. I have worked 2 jobs before. You do not have to." Grace took the envelope from him. "I will not become another person you later accuse of staying for your money. That is not what I would do." "You already did." The words silenced him. That evening, Ethan sat alone in his office, staring at the transfer form he had opened for Noah's hospital. He did not send it. For once, he understood that money could solve the bill while making the wound between them worse. In the weeks that followed, Ethan and Grace slowly stopped avoiding each other. They spoke during Eleanor's appointments. They shared quiet dinners when the staff had gone home. Grace learned that Ethan had started programming at 12 because machines seemed easier to understand than people. Ethan learned that Grace once wanted to study social work before illness consumed her family. One night, a power outage darkened half the mansion during another winter storm. Grace found Ethan in the library lighting candles. "You own a cybersecurity company," she said. "Should your house not have a better backup system?" "It does." "Then why are we standing in the dark?" "The generator is frozen." "That sounds reliable." He laughed. It was the first real laugh she had heard from him. They sat near the fireplace while snow pressed against the windows. Ethan told her about his father's death and the business partner who stole from the company afterward. Grace spoke about her mother's final night and the guilt of feeling relieved when the suffering ended. Neither offered easy comfort. They simply listened. For a few minutes, Ethan felt something he had not allowed himself in years. Safe. That feeling frightened him more than betrayal. By spring, the tabloids had moved on. Lucas faced charges for fraud, conspiracy, and tampering with security systems. Vanessa's attorneys tried to separate her from the financial scheme, but the recording of her drugging Ethan's drink made public sympathy nearly impossible. The mansion returned to normal. Ethan did not. He watched Grace more closely, not because he wanted to catch her lying, but because he feared how much he wanted to believe her. When she smiled at him, he wondered whether kindness could remain real after love entered it. When she refused expensive gifts, he wondered whether refusal was another form of strategy. When Eleanor suggested Grace cared for him, his hope immediately became suspicion. One evening, Ethan met privately with a crisis management consultant named Robert Hayes. "I need a controlled announcement," Ethan said. "What kind?" "That Whitmore Technologies has suffered major losses." Robert stared at him. "The company is stable." "I know. You want the market to believe otherwise?" "Not the market. Only a limited circle. That is dangerous. I want rumors of failed investments, frozen personal assets, and the possible loss of the mansion." Robert leaned back. "Why?" Ethan did not answer immediately. "I need to know who stays." Robert studied him. "This is about a woman. It is about trust. No, it is about fear wearing a suit." Ethan's expression hardened. "Can you do it?" "Yes, but I think you will regret it." The rumors began 3 days later. First, an anonymous article claimed Whitmore Technologies had lost hundreds of millions in a failed acquisition. Then, a business blog reported that Ethan's personal assets were tied to emergency company loans. Within 48 hours, people who once called him daily became unavailable. Dinner invitations stopped. Board members requested private assurances. Former friends sent careful messages expressing concern while quietly distancing themselves. Grace heard the rumors from Martha. She found Ethan in his study surrounded by boxes. "What is happening?" He looked exhausted. "The company is collapsing." "That cannot happen in 2 days." "The problem started months ago. Lucas hid more than we knew." Grace stepped closer. "How bad is it?" "I use my private savings trying to stabilize everything." "And the mansion? The bank may take it." She stared at him. "Why did you not tell Eleanor? She has already lost enough. You cannot hide this from her." "I am trying to protect her." Grace recognized the same mistake she had made with Noah, confusing secrecy with protection. "What happens to the staff?" "I cannot continue paying everyone." Martha had been instructed to announce temporary layoffs the following morning. Grace looked around the study. Ethan had removed photographs and personal files, making the collapse appear painfully real. "You will need somewhere to live," she said. "I found a small apartment." "Where?" "Near the south side. That is far from the office." "There may not be an office." For the first time, Ethan allowed his voice to break. Grace believed him. The next morning, employees gathered in the main hall. Ethan apologized and promised to restore their jobs if the company survived. Several people cried. Others began making calls before they had even left the property. Grace packed her uniform but did not return her house key. Martha noticed. "You are keeping it? Mrs. Whitmore may need help moving." Eleanor had agreed to participate in Ethan's deception only after a bitter argument. She hated the plan but feared pushing him further away. "You are going to hurt her," she had warned. "I need certainty." Certainty purchased through a lie will never become trust. Ethan refused to listen. Within a week, he moved into a modest apartment with used furniture and a narrow kitchen. Most of his friends disappeared. Grace did not. She arrived the first evening, carrying groceries. "You cannot afford these," Ethan said. "I can afford soup. I am not hungry." That is what people say before they become unbearable. She unpacked bread, vegetables, coffee, and basic medication. "You should be looking for another job," he said. "I already found part-time work." "Then why are you here?" "Because losing money does not make you stop needing dinner." The next day, she returned with information about consulting opportunities. "You built a company once," she said. "You can start smaller." "You still believe I can rebuild? Money did not create your skill." A week later, Grace placed an envelope on the kitchen table. Ethan opened it. Inside were several $1,000s. He stared at her. "What is this?" "My savings. For Noah's surgery, I negotiated a payment plan with the hospital. You cannot give this to me. You said you need a deposit to begin consulting. This is everything you have." "Not everything." "What is left?" "My brother, my ability to work, my dignity." Ethan felt sick. The test had already given him the answer, but instead of ending it, he allowed the deception to continue. He told himself he needed to be completely certain. In truth, he was afraid that admitting the lie would make Grace leave. Days became weeks. Grace brought food, helped create proposals, and sat beside him through nights when he pretended to worry about bills. One evening, she found him staring through the apartment window. "Everyone left," he said. "Not everyone." He turned toward her. "Why are you still here?" Grace looked down. "Because I care about you. You cared when I was a billionaire. I cared before I understood you. And now? Now I know you are stubborn, suspicious, and terrible at making coffee." He smiled faintly. She stepped closer. "But I also know you love your mother. I know you built something from nothing. I know betrayal made you afraid, but it did not make you cruel." Ethan could barely look at her. Grace continued. "I have loved you for longer than I wanted to admit." The words should have brought joy. Instead, they brought shame. He could not let her confess love inside a lie. "Grace, there is something I have to tell you." She saw his expression and became still. "The company did not collapse," he said. Silence filled the apartment. The assets were never frozen. The mansion was never in danger. Grace stared at him. "What are you saying?" The rumors were controlled. For what? He forced himself to answer. To see who would stay. Her face slowly changed. "You tested me. I needed to know whether you cared about me or the money. You knew. I was afraid. You watched me give you Noah's surgery money. I was going to return it. That is not the point. I know. No, Ethan, you do not." Tears gathered in her eyes, but her voice remained steady. "Vanessa lied because she wanted your wealth. You lied because you were afraid of losing it. Your reasons were different, but you both decided my feelings were something you had the right to manipulate. I never meant to hurt you. You created a fake disaster and let me believe you were alone. I needed certainty. You had certainty the night I came back to stop Vanessa." Grace removed the apartment key from her pocket and placed it on the table beside the envelope. "I loved you when I believed you had nothing. Grace, please. But you did not trust me enough to love me without an examination." She walked toward the door. Ethan followed. "Let me explain." "You already did." She opened the door, then stopped without turning around. "You do not need another test, Ethan. You need the courage to believe someone after they have earned it." The door closed behind her. Ethan stood alone in the apartment he had never needed. Surrounded by groceries Grace could barely afford and plans for a company that had never failed. The test had proven that Grace loved him. It had also proven that he did not know how to receive that love without destroying it first. The following morning, Ethan returned to the mansion. Grace's room was empty. On the bed lay her folded uniform and a sealed envelope with his name written across the front. He opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a single page, and the first line made him realize an apology might no longer be enough to bring her back. The first line of Grace's letter was simple. You did not lose me because you were afraid. You lost me because you turned your fear into a weapon. Ethan read it twice before continuing. Grace did not insult him. She did not accuse him of being heartless. That would have been easier to endure. Instead, she told the truth. She wrote that she understood why Vanessa and Lucas had damaged his ability to trust. She understood why wealth had made every relationship feel uncertain. But understanding his pain did not require accepting the pain he caused others. She reminded him that she had defended Eleanor before knowing her name, returned to the mansion after being framed, and risked herself to stop Vanessa from drugging him. He had already been given proof. He had simply demanded more. At the bottom of the page, Grace had written, I hope one day you learn that love is not proven by surviving every trap you set. It is protected by honesty. Ethan lowered the letter and sat on the edge of the empty bed. For the first time, he stopped thinking about how to bring Grace back. He began thinking about what he had done to make her leave. Eleanor found him there 20 minutes later. She looked at the letter in his hand. What did she say? That I turned fear into a weapon. Did she lie? No. Eleanor entered the room. What are you going to do? I will apologize. You already apologized before. Then I will explain. She understands your reasons. That is not the problem. Ethan looked up. What do you want me to do? Stop treating forgiveness like a business outcome you can obtain with the right offer. His expression tightened. I love her. Then respect her decision long enough to change without demanding a reward. Those words followed Ethan into the weeks that came next. He ended the false bankruptcy story publicly and restored every employee's position with back pay. Then he stood before the entire Whitmore Technology staff and admitted that the rumors had been created under his direction. He did not blame Lucas. He did not mention trauma. He simply accepted responsibility. I allowed fear to influence my judgment, he told them. People who depended on this company suffered because I wanted personal certainty. That was wrong. The confession cost him credibility with several board members. Ethan accepted that too. He hired an independent ethics officer and gave up his ability to approve private surveillance involving employees. Every senior executive would now be subject to the same oversight, including him. Eleanor watched from the back of the room. For the first time since Grace left, she saw her son changing rather than performing regret. Grace heard about the announcement through Martha but did not call him. She returned to working long shifts at a rehabilitation center and spent every spare hour with Noah. The hospital had agreed to begin his surgery preparations after Grace secured a payment plan, but the remaining expenses were overwhelming. One afternoon, a hospital administrator called her into a private office. Your brother's balance has been covered. Grace stared at her. By whom? The donor requested privacy. Then return it. The administrator looked surprised. Miss Carter, this guarantees the surgery. I need to know who paid. After several calls, Grace received the answer she expected. Ethan Whitmore. She drove to the mansion that evening and found him in the study. He stood when she entered. Grace, you paid Noah's hospital bill. Yes, I did not ask you to. I know. Then why did you do it? Because I used his surgery money as part of my lie. Her anger paused. Ethan continued. I am not asking you to come back. I am not asking for forgiveness. The payment is not a gift. It is repayment for the harm I caused. You cannot repair everything with money. No, but I can repair the bill with money. Grace studied him. He looked tired, but he did not move closer or try to touch her. I will repay you, she said. You do not owe me. I decide what I owe. He nodded. All right. The absence of an argument unsettled her. She had expected persuasion, flowers, perhaps another grand gesture. Instead, Ethan opened a drawer and handed her the hospital receipt. The payment is in Noah's name. No conditions. No access to his medical records. No publicity. Grace took it. Thank you. You are welcome. She turned toward the door. Grace. She stopped. I am sorry. She closed her eyes briefly. I know. He did not ask whether that changed anything. That mattered more than she wanted it to. Noah's surgery took place 3 weeks later. Ethan did not appear at the hospital. He sent no flowers and made no calls. He respected the distance Grace had requested. But when she walked into the waiting room after 8 exhausting hours, she found Eleanor and Martha sitting near the window. Eleanor stood. "He is stable," Grace said through tears. "The surgeon said everything went well." Eleanor embraced her. Grace looked around. "Did Ethan send you?" "No, he wanted to come, but I told him this moment belonged to you and Noah." Grace felt something painful shift inside her. Ethan had finally chosen not to force himself into a place simply because he cared. Over the following month, Grace heard about he restored the college assistance fund for household employees. He apologized privately to every worker affected by the fake collapse. He sold the apartment he had used for the test and donated the proceeds to a Chicago trust supporting families facing medical debt. None of the donations carried his name. Grace knew because Martha told her, not because Ethan wanted her to know. Still, forgiveness did not arrive all at once. Some mornings, Grace remembered the groceries she had bought while believing he was ruined. Other nights, she remembered how frightened he had looked inside the apartment and wondered how much of that fear had been real. She loved him. That was no longer in question. The question was whether love could survive without trust. 3 months after she left the mansion, Grace received an envelope. There was no expensive seal and no handwritten plea. Inside was a simple card. "Eleanor Whitmore requests the pleasure of your company at a small family dinner this Friday. No press, no speeches, no expectations." Below Eleanor's message, Ethan had added one line. "You are free to say no." Grace read the invitation several times. Noah leaned over her shoulder. "You are going. I have not decided. You have been holding the card for 10 minutes. That does not mean anything. It means you want to go." Grace looked at him. "What if nothing has changed? Then you leave. And if he has changed?" Noah smiled. "Then maybe you stop punishing both of you for something he is finally trying to repair." Friday evening, Grace stood outside the Whitmore mansion wearing a simple navy dress. Her hands trembled as she looked through the tall windows at the familiar entrance hall. It was the same place where she had once stood in a faded uniform and raised her hand against Vanessa. The same place where Ethan had first believed the worst of her. Martha opened the door. "You came. I almost did not. That is still coming." Eleanor welcomed Grace with tears in her eyes and embraced her as though no time had passed. Ethan remained near the staircase. He wore no formal suit, only a white shirt with the sleeves rolled back. He looked uncertain in a way Grace had never seen before. "Thank you for coming," he said. "Your mother invited me." "I know." Dinner was quiet and warm. No one discussed the past until Eleanor left the table to answer a call from Noah, who had promised to report on his recovery. Grace and Ethan were alone. "I am not ready to return," she said. "I know. I am not ready to trust you completely." "I know that too, and I will not accept another test. There will never be another one." She looked at him. "What happens when fear returns?" "I tell you the truth." The answer was immediate. Grace lowered her eyes. "I cannot promise forgiveness tonight. I did not invite you for that. Then why am I here?" Ethan stood. "Because there is something my mother wants you to see." He led her toward the ballroom. The doors were closed. When Ethan opened them, the room beyond was dark except for a circle of warm light at its center. Grace stopped at the entrance. There were no guests, cameras, or decorations. Only Eleanor, Martha, Noah, and one empty place waiting beside Ethan. Grace looked at him. "What is this?" Ethan took a slow breath. "Not a test." He stepped into the light. "It is the truth I should have given you from the beginning." And when Grace saw what he was holding, she realized the evening was about to change both of their lives. Ethan was holding a small wooden box. Grace froze at the entrance to the ballroom, but he did not open it immediately. He remained beneath the warm light, visibly nervous, while Eleanor, Martha, and Noah watched from a respectful distance. "This room is where I first saw you," Ethan said. "Not where I truly understood you, but where I first had the chance." Grace looked around the ballroom. Months earlier, it had been crowded with wealthy guests and filled with judgment. She had stood in a faded blue uniform, prepared to lose everything because she refused to watch an elderly stranger be abused. Tonight, the room was nearly empty. There was no audience to impress. That mattered. Ethan continued. You defended my mother before you knew her name. You came back after I accused you of stealing. You saved me after I had already shown you that I did not trust you. Grace's eyes filled with emotion, but she remained still. And then, he said, when you gave me every reason to believe in you, I created another lie because fear felt safer than love. He opened the wooden box. Inside was not a large diamond ring. It was a simple gold band beside a folded note. Grace looked at him questioningly. The note contains no contract, no condition, and no promise about the company, Ethan said. It only says that whatever answer you give tonight will be respected. He removed the ring but did not kneel yet. I am not asking you to forget what I did. I am not asking you to trust me because I apologized. I am asking for the chance to spend the rest of my life earning the trust I should never have gambled with. Grace glanced toward Eleanor. The older woman smiled through tears but did not interfere. Noah gave his sister a small nod. Ethan lowered himself to one knee. Grace Carter, you showed me that love does not need wealth to remain loyal. You also showed me that love cannot survive without honesty. Will you marry me not because I have changed completely, but because I am willing to keep changing beside you? For several seconds, Grace said nothing. Ethan did not rush her. He did not explain again. He simply waited. That patience became the final proof she needed. Yes, Grace whispered. Ethan released a breath that sounded as though he had been holding it for months. But I have conditions, she added. He almost smiled. Of course you do. No secret investigations. No loyalty tests. No decisions about my life without me. I agree. If fear returns, you tell me. I will. And I will not enter this family as someone you rescued. Ethan stood. You rescued me. Grace looked at the ring. Then we enter as equals. As equals, he promised. She held out her hand. When Ethan placed the ring on her finger, Eleanor began crying openly. Noah applauded, and Martha pretended to adjust the tablecloth so no one would notice her wiping her eyes. Ethan kissed Grace gently. There were no photographers, no champagne tower, no board members measuring the value of the moment. For the first time, their happiness belonged only to them. They did not marry immediately. Grace refused to let an engagement become an excuse to ignore the work still ahead. She continued living with Noah while he recovered. Ethan attended counseling to understand why betrayal had turned into control. They learned to disagree without disappearing, and to ask questions without turning them into accusations. Trust returned through ordinary actions. A phone left openly on a table. A difficult truth spoken before it became a secret. A disagreement that ended with both people still in the room. 6 months later, Grace walked through the Whitmore ballroom again. This time, she was not carrying a serving tray. She wore a simple white wedding dress, and Noah walked beside her. His surgery had been successful, and although his recovery was not complete, he stood proudly with one hand over hers. You saved me, he whispered before they reached the aisle. Grace shook her head. We saved each other. Eleanor waited near the front, dressed in deep blue. She looked at Grace, not as an employee or even as the woman who had protected her, but as the daughter she had chosen. Ethan stood beneath an arch of white roses. The room was filled with friends, staff members, hospital workers, and employees from Whitmore Technologies. There were wealthy guests as well, but no one had been invited merely because of status. Martha occupied the first row. The elderly groundskeeper sat beside her. Even the young dishwasher Grace had once protected attended with his family. The people in that room were not there because Ethan wanted to display power. They were there because Grace had taught him that a home was measured by who felt welcome inside it. When Grace reached him, Ethan took her hands. I once believed money revealed every person's true intentions, he said during their vows. Then I met a woman who had almost nothing and still gave more than anyone around me. You taught me that character is revealed by what we do when there is no reward, and by whether we tell the truth when a lie would be easier. Grace looked into his eyes. And you taught me that forgiveness does not mean returning to the way things were, she replied. It means building something better, with boundaries, honesty, and courage. They exchanged rings and were declared husband and wife. As applause filled the ballroom, Eleanor closed her eyes and whispered a quiet prayer. The house that had once held humiliation and deception now held peace. Vanessa and Lucas eventually pleaded guilty to multiple charges connected to fraud, evidence tampering, and the attempt to drug Ethan. Their punishment did not bring Grace satisfaction, but it ended the danger they had created. Ethan reorganized Whitmore Technologies, separating friendship from financial authority and creating independent oversight across the company. Grace chose not to become a decorative billionaire's wife. With Eleanor's support and her own leadership, she created the Whitmore Carter Foundation, a program helping low-income workers facing medical debt, workplace abuse, and sudden family emergencies. The first grant funded heart treatment for families who could not afford hospital deposits. Grace insisted that her name appear beside Ethan's, not beneath it. Years later, people still told the story of the maid who slapped a billionaire's fiancé in the middle of an engagement party. But the slap was never the most important part. The important part was why she did it. Grace defended a woman she believed had no power. Vanessa harmed people when she believed they had none. Ethan tested love because he feared losing control. And Eleanor recognized that true character appears when a person believes no reward is coming. On their first anniversary, Grace and Ethan stood together near the ballroom entrance while snow fell outside. "Do you ever think about that night?" Ethan asked. "The night I almost lost my job? The night you slapped the woman I planned to marry?" Grace smiled. "Sometimes. You changed my entire life in less than 5 seconds." "No," she said. "The slap only made you look. Changing required you to finally see." Ethan took her hand. Outside, Chicago disappeared beneath fresh snow, but the mansion remained warm. Not because of its fireplaces, chandeliers, or wealth. It was warm because the people inside it had finally learned the difference between possession and love. Real love does not ask you to prove yourself by surviving endless pain. It does not demand that you become smaller, quieter, or easier to control. Real love tells the truth. Real love respects boundaries. And real love stays not because it has passed a test, but because two people choose each other honestly, again and again. If Grace's story gave you something meaningful to think about, type 1 in the comments. If you believe the story was not helpful to you, type 0 and tell us what you would have done differently. And if you believe kindness, honesty, and courage still matter, subscribe to the channel and join us for more powerful stories about people who refuse to lose themselves. Because sometimes the person everyone overlooks is the one who sees the truth first.